On 120 warships destroyed, 2 carrier strike groups deployed, $40 billion of naval firepower spread across the Persian Gulf and the Arabian Sea, and the Strait of Hormuz is still closed. 95% of commercial traffic has vanished. 3,200 vessels sit idle, including 250 oil tankers anchored with nowhere to go. The world economy hemorrhages $40 billion every single week. And to solve this crisis, the most powerful Navy ever assembled had to make a phone call. Not to a defense contractor, not to a Silicon Valley startup, to the United States Air Force, specifically to a squadron flying a 50-year-old airplane that the Pentagon has been trying to kill longer than most of its pilots have been alive, and an airplane designed in the 1970s to destroy Soviet tanks on the plains of Germany. An airplane that senior defense officials called obsolete, redundant, and unfit for modern combat, exactly 11 months before it became the single most effective weapon system operating over the most dangerous waterway on Earth. Before we break down exactly how this happened, we have a quick request. You are watching a brand new channel. Our dedicated team is working over 12 hours a day, every single day, without rest, to bring you the highest quality military analysis on YouTube. Our immediate goal is to reach our first 1,000 subscribers to monetize the channel and fund this research. If you want to support real tactical breakdowns, please hit that subscribe button. It means the world to our team. On April 3rd, 2026, an F-15E Strike Eagle was shot down over Iranian territory. The pilot ejected and was recovered within hours by a personnel recovery task force flying H-60W Jolly Green helicopters. But the weapons systems officer, a highly respected colonel, was stranded deep inside Iran for more than 36 hours. The American military launched one of the most complex combat search and rescue operations in decades. SEAL Team 6, CIA assets, and dozens of aircraft converged on a mountain crevice where the colonel had taken shelter with injuries. President Trump confirmed the rescue on Truth Social with 2 words that echoed across every news channel on the planet: "We got him." But during that same window, something else happened that barely made the headlines. An A-10 Thunderbolt providing close air support over the southern corridor of the Strait of Hormuz was struck by hostile fire. Iranian state media claimed credit. The pilot ejected over the Persian Gulf and was recovered by Navy assets within minutes. 2 American aircraft lost in the same 48-hour window. One dominated global news coverage. The other was buried beneath the rescue story. And the one that was buried is the one that explains everything about why this war is being fought the way it is. This is not a coincidence. This is a pattern. To understand why the A-10 was flying over Hormuz in the first place, you need to understand what the Navy was facing before it arrived. The Strait of Hormuz is 21 nautical miles wide at its narrowest point. That sounds like room to maneuver. It is not. And the actual navigable shipping corridor is 6 nautical miles across. 2 miles inbound, 2 miles outbound, and a 2-mile buffer between them. Everything outside that corridor is Iranian territorial water. Now, place the threat inside that space. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy operates more than 1,500 fast attack craft. These are not warships. They are fiberglass speedboats, most under 15 tons, capable of speeds between 50 and 70 knots. Some newer designs reportedly exceed 100. Each boat costs between $50,000 and $500,000. Each one carries a Nasr-1 anti-ship missile with a 35-kilometer range and a terminal velocity of Mach 0.9. That is enough to mission kill a frigate. Their doctrine is called swarm tactics. It launched 30 to 50 boats simultaneously from multiple directions, overwhelm the sensors, saturate the point defenses, force the Aegis destroyer to choose which target to engage, knowing that every missile it fires costs exponentially more than every target it hits. And this is where the equation breaks. An SM-6 interceptor costs $5.3 million. Firing one at a $50,000 speedboat creates a 100-to-1 cost ratio in Iran's favor. A Harpoon anti-ship missile costs $1.5 million and was designed to track cruiser-sized radar signatures, not composite skiffs doing 70 knots between container ships. The Mark 45 5-inch deck gun fires 16 to 20 rounds per minute, effective against a single target, useless against 50. The Phalanx close-in weapon system empties its entire magazine in 20 seconds and requires 4 minutes to reload. And the F/A-18E Super Hornet, The carrier's primary strike fighter costs $30,000 per flight hour, crosses the engagement zone so fast that every surface target stays in the pilot's field of view for less than 2 seconds, and cannot visually distinguish an IRGC attack boat from a Kuwaiti fishing dhow among 3,200 civilian vessels. The Navy does have one platform built for this kind of fight. The MH-60R Seahawk helicopter carries Hellfire missiles and a cabin-mounted gun. It can identify and engage small surface targets, but it was designed primarily for anti-submarine warfare. It carries 4 to 8 Hellfires per sortie, has limited loiter time compared to a fixed-wing aircraft, and is vulnerable to the 12.7 and 14.5 millimeter machine gun fire that saturates the Hormuz coastline without the 12,200 pounds of titanium armor that keeps an A-10 pilot breathing. The Seahawk is a scalpel. This problem requires a chainsaw. The system was never designed for this. Every weapon in the carrier strike group was engineered for blue water warfare, open ocean, high-value targets, long-range precision munitions matched to expensive threats. The Strait of Hormuz is brown water, a 6-mile corridor filled with cheap, fast, numerous targets hiding among thousands of civilian ships. The Navy brought a surgical laser to a knife fight, and the knife fight needed a shotgun. The Pentagon had that shotgun. They just spent the last 2 decades trying to throw it in the trash. The A-10 Thunderbolt II was not designed around an airframe. It was designed around a gun. The GAU-8 Avenger is a 7-barrel Gatling cannon that fires 30mm depleted uranium rounds at 3,900 per minute, 65 rounds per second. The aircraft carries 1,174 rounds in a drum the size of a Volkswagen Beetle. A standard engagement is a 2-second burst, roughly 130 rounds downrange. The cost per round for the armor-piercing depleted uranium variant is approximately $137. Now do the math that changes everything. 70 rounds into a fiberglass fastboat costs under $10,000. The same kill with an SM-6 costs $5.3 million. That is a 500 to 1 cost advantage, not marginal, not incremental, but categorical, a complete inversion of the economics of engagement. But the cannon is only part of the weapon's architecture. The A-10 carries 16,000 pounds of ordnance across 11 hardpoints. For medium-range engagements at 12 nautical miles, the pilot fires an AGM-65 Maverick, an infrared-guided missile that costs between $150,000 and $170,000, still 30 times cheaper than an SM-6. For mixed-threat environments where fast boats operate alongside drones, the A-10 deploys a PKWS, a laser guidance kit bolted onto a standard Hydra 70 rocket. Cost per shot, roughly $35,000. Precision guidance at the price of a mid-range sedan. Now consider the physics that make this weapon's suite devastating in this specific environment. And the A-10 has a maximum speed of Mach 0.75, approximately 420 miles per hour. But when it drops to low altitude and begins patrol loops over the strait, it flies at roughly 300 knots. And this is where most analysts get it wrong. They call it slow. It is not slow. It is optimized. When an F/A-18E crosses the shipping lane at 500+ knots, every target on the surface stays in the pilot's visual field for under 2 seconds. At that speed, positive identification of an IRGC boat among thousands of civilian vessels is functionally impossible without relying entirely on sensor data piped through a heads-down display. The A-10 at 300 knots gives the pilot 2 to 3 times longer to identify, confirm, and engage. The pilot looks out the canopy and sees the rocket launchers bolted to the gunnel, sees the military pattern hull, pulls the trigger. That is not a limitation. That is a design philosophy called persistence. And this is where the equation breaks again. The A-10 stays on station for approximately 1 hour and 50 minutes on internal fuel. With 600-gallon external tanks, that extends to 2.5 hours over the strait, flying racetrack patterns, scanning, waiting, selecting. The aircraft does not burn through its fuel racing to and from a carrier 200 miles offshore. It operates from forward air bases on the Arabian Peninsula and stays in the kill zone. The wings explain why it does this so efficiently. The A-10 uses straight wings, not the swept wings of the FA-18 or F-35. Swept wings reduce drag at high Mach numbers but increase it at low speeds. The A-10 never needs high Mach, At 300 knots, straight wings generate lift more efficiently, burn less fuel, and deliver a tighter turn radius. With the shipping lane only 6 nautical miles wide, the A-10 can bank, reverse, and re-enter its patrol loop without ever leaving the engagement corridor. The straight wing also creates a more stable gun platform. Less oscillation at low speed means the GAU-8 puts rounds exactly where the pilot aims during a strafing run. One more technical detail about that gun that most people miss. The recoil force of the GAU-8 at full rate is approximately 45 kilonewtons, 10,000 pounds of force pushing backward. Each of the A-10's 2 TF-34 turbofan engines produces about 40 kilonewtons of thrust pushing forward. During a 2-second burst, the gun generates nearly as much rearward force as one engine generates forward. The airplane physically decelerates while firing. That is not a flaw. That is a measure of how much kinetic energy is being delivered to the target. Each 30mm depleted uranium penetrator leaves the barrel at over 1,000 meters per second, carrying roughly 267 kilojoules of energy, enough to penetrate 69 millimeters of rolled homogeneous armor at 500 meters. A fiberglass fast boat has 0 armor. This is not a fair fight. It was never designed to be. And the A-10 absorbs the punishment that comes back. The pilot sits inside a titanium bathtub weighing 12,200 pounds. The only cockpit in the American inventory encased in armor rated to withstand 23mm armor-piercing rounds and 57mm fragmentation. In Desert Storm, an A-10 returned to base with 378 holes in its airframe. In Iraq in 2003, Captain Kim Campbell of the 75th Expeditionary Fighter Squadron lost all hydraulic control over Baghdad. Both primary and backup lines severed. She flew her A-10 home using manual reversion, a mechanical system of cranks and cables that bypasses every electronic and hydraulic flight control. She landed safely. The Distinguished Flying Cross followed. That survivability is not theoretical at Hormuz. It is operational. On April 3rd, an A-10 took hostile fire over the strait and the pilot survived. The IRGC coastal emplacements fire 12.7 and 14.5 millimeter machine guns. An F/A-18 avoids that threat by flying high and fast, which means losing the visual identification that makes the difference between hitting a military target and hitting a civilian fishing boat in a corridor with 3,200 vessels. The A-10 flies low, absorbs the hits, and keeps shooting, because that is what it was built to do. But one airplane cannot hold a 6-mile corridor alone. And that is not what is happening. What is happening above the Strait of Hormuz right now is something the American military has never executed at this scale in combat. 3 branches of the armed forces operating simultaneously over a single 6-mile naval corridor, each filling the gap the others cannot. Layer 1 is the A-10, Air Force. It flies racetrack patterns at 3,000 feet, hunting fast boats and coastal missile positions. The GAU-8 and APKWS handle close-range threats. The Maverick handles targets at 12 nautical miles. The A-10 costs $19,000 per flight hour. Layer 2 is the AH-64 Apache, Army. Attack helicopters operating from expeditionary sea bases, floating forward, operating platforms for Army aviation. This concept was first tested operationally in 2020 aboard the USS Lewis B. Puller and is now deployed at scale during this conflict. Army attack helicopters staging from a Navy ship to fight a naval battle. Each Apache carries up to 16 Hellfire missiles at $70,000 to $200,000 each and a 30mm M230 chain gun. Same caliber as the Warthog but chain-driven rather than Gatling. That highly effective against unarmored boats. They fly at 200 feet below the A-10, picking off targets that slip through the first layer. Layer 3 is the Navy itself. Aegis destroyers and littoral combat ships maintaining the air defense umbrella and surface patrol. The destroyers preserve their SM-6 inventory for the threats that actually justify the cost. Anti-ship ballistic missiles, cruise missiles flying at Mach 3. The Odin and Helios directed energy systems handle drone threats. The littoral combat ships deploy their own drone swarms and mine-clearing systems. Here is the convergence equation that changes everything. Before combined arms integration, the Navy engaged fast boats with SM-6 interceptors. $5.3 million per shot against $50,000 targets. Draining 90 to 96 vertical launch cells on each destroyer, many of which are already committed to Tomahawks, SM-2s, and ESSM quad packs. After combined arms, the A-10 handles fast boats for $10,000 per engagement. The Apache handles close-in threats for $70,000, and the Navy preserves its missile inventory for the Mach 3 threats that nothing else in the theater can stop. The vertical launch cells last 10 times longer. The cost equation flips completely. Iran's strategic miscalculation was assuming the Navy would fight this war alone. Their entire swarm doctrine was engineered to drain VLS cells, 1,500 fast boats against 96 vertical launch tubes per destroyer. The arithmetic was intentional. The IRGC studied the 2002 Millennium Challenge wargame, where retired Marine Lieutenant General Paul Van Riper used swarm boats to sink 16 American warships in the opening salvo and forced the Pentagon to restart the entire exercise. Iran built a naval strategy around that simulation, but they built it for a scenario where the Navy answers alone. They did not plan for the Air Force flying at 3,000 feet with a gun that fires 65 rounds per second. They did not plan for the Army flying at 200 feet with laser-guided missiles launched from a Navy ship. The equation changes when the variables change, so the question that started this video deserves its answer. Why did the most powerful Navy in human history need to call the Air Force? Not because the Navy failed. The Navy was engineered for blue water dominance, open ocean, capital ships, precision weapons measured in hundreds of nautical miles. The Strait of Hormuz is brown water, a 6-mile shipping lane, 1,500 composite speedboats, cheap weapons requiring cheap answers. A competent strategist does not use a scalpel to clear a minefield. A competent strategist selects the right tool for the specific problem. And the right tool turned out to be a 50-year-old airplane that the Air Force has been trying to retire since 2015. $19,000 per flight hour versus $30,000. $10,000 per kill versus $5.3 million. The answer to a crisis worth billions of dollars in stranded oil was an aircraft flying 300 knots with a gun that weighs more than a small car. But the A-10 will not last forever. Congress currently prohibits the Air Force from reducing the fleet below 103 aircraft through September 2026. The transition window from 2027 through 2029 remains open, and the loss of an A-10 to hostile fire over Hormuz on April 3rd just proved simultaneously that the aircraft is vulnerable and that it is irreplaceable. When the Warthog finally leaves the inventory, what fills that gap? Loitering drones armed with 30mm cannons? The MQ-9 Reaper adapted for maritime interdiction? Or does the Navy finally invest in its own brown water close air support platform, an aircraft designed not for the deep ocean, but for the narrow, contested corridors where modern wars are actually being decided? If this breakdown changed how you think about naval warfare, subscribe and tell us in the comments what you think replaces the A-10 when it is gone. Because the equation does not care about tradition. The equation only cares about what works.